My name is Cassidy, and for 29 years, I have been a placeholder. That is the only word that fits. In the hallowed marble-floored halls of the Thorne estate in mainline Philadelphia, you are either a masterpiece or you are a mistake. My father, Dr. Alistair Thorne, did not make mistakes. As a world-class neurosurgeon, his entire life was built on the foundation of absolute, mathematical certainty. He could navigate the delicate webs of a human brain with a laser focus that saved thousands. But when he looked at me, his own daughter, that focus turned into something cold, something sharp, and something deeply, deeply suspicious. He was old money Philly, tall, lean, with hair like silver wire and eyes so dark they looked like obsidian. My brother, Sterling, who is 31, was his mirror image. Same brooding brow, same talent for silence, same olive skin. And then, there was me. I am 5'4" on a good day. I have copper red hair that curls like wildfire, and eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic. My mother, Evelyn, is a soft-spoken woman, a blonde, blue-eyed socialite who spent 3 decades trying to bridge the gap between her husband's ego and her daughter's reality. For as long as I can remember, Alistair treated me like a foreign object that had somehow lodged itself into his perfect life. He never hugged me. He never told me he was proud. Instead, he would look at me over the rim of his glasses during Sunday brunch and say, "Evelyn, remind me, which side of the family gave Cassidy those common features?" Certainly not mine. It wasn't just a joke. It was an indictment. When Sterling went to Princeton, Alistair threw a party that made the local news. When I got into the University of Pennsylvania for a master's in social work, Alistair sighed, checked his Patek Philippe watch, and asked why I was choosing a career for the mediocre. He refused to pay a single cent of my tuition. He told me, right in front of our extended family during Christmas dinner, "I don't invest in unknown quantities. Perhaps your real father can help you with the bill." My mother dropped her crystal wine glass. It shattered against the hardwood, a spray of red Merlot looking like a crime scene. "Alistair," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, not tonight." But he just smirked. That thin, clinical smirk that he used right before telling a patient they had 6 months to live. "I'm just being a scientist, Evelyn. Look at her. The hair, the height, the temperament. The math just doesn't add up." I spent 29 years believing I was the bad seed. I spent 29 years working 3 jobs, living in a cramped apartment in West Philly, and paying off $60,000 in student loans, all because my father was certain I wasn't his. I hated myself for it. I looked in the mirror and hated my red hair. I hated my height. I hated that I didn't have the Thorne brilliance. But 3 months ago, Alistair decided he wanted closure. He was approaching his retirement gala, a massive black tie event at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Every donor, every medical board member, and every rival he'd crushed over the last 40 years would be there. He wanted to present a unified legacy. He wanted a genetic mapping project, something he could display on the big screens to show the Thorne superiority. He issued an ultimatum: take a high-level clinical DNA test, or be officially removed from the family trust and the upcoming gala. "I want the truth, Cassidy," he said, leaning back in his leather chair in his mahogany-walled library. "I've lived with the doubt for 3 decades. It's time to see what your mother has been hiding." My mother was sitting on the sofa, her hands shaking so hard her tea was splashing over the side of the cup. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at me with eyes that were full of a strange, ancient fear. I signed the paper, not for the money, not for the trust. I signed it because I wanted to look him in his obsidian eyes when the results came back, and hear him apologize to my mother. I wanted to see him on his knees for 30 years of calling her a traitor. I didn't know that the truth wouldn't just break the Thorne family, it would incinerate it. We are just getting started, and I can already feel the tension in that library. If you've ever been the black sheep of your family, or felt like you didn't quite fit the mold, take a moment to like this video. It lets me know you're with me. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from as we dive into the secret that changed everything. And if this story truly resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. But only if you want to see justice served as much as I do. Now, let me take you back to the night the first set of results arrived. The letter didn't come in the mail, it was hand-delivered by a courier from the Precision Genomics Lab. Alistair gathered us all in the dining room. The table was set with Waterford crystal and heirloom silver, as if we were celebrating a holiday instead of a genetic execution. He opened the envelope with a silver letter opener. He didn't even look at the data at first. He just looked at me, and then at my mother. "Let's see," he murmured, his eyes scanning the page. "Cassidy Thorne, genetic markers." He stopped. The room went silent. I mean, the kind of silence that feels like it's vibrating in your teeth. He read the page again, then a third time. "Alistair?" my mother whispered. He didn't answer her. He looked at the paper, then he looked at Sterling, who was sitting there looking bored and perfect. Then he looked back at me. His face wasn't red with anger, it was gray. It was the color of wet cement. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice cracking. It was the first time in 29 years I had ever heard his voice break. "The lab, they've sent the wrong file." "What does it say, Dad?" Sterling asked, finally putting down his phone. Alistair didn't say a word. He just slid the paper across the table toward me. I picked it up. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I looked at the bolded text at the bottom. Subject A, Cassidy Thorne. Biological relationship to Alistair Thorne, 0%. Biological relationship to Evelyn Thorne, 0%. I felt like someone had just punched me in the solar plexus. I wasn't his, but I wasn't hers either. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the paper, her eyes wide, her mouth hanging open. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you I never... Alistair, I told you I was faithful." "Then whose child is this?" Alistair roared, finally finding his voice. "If she isn't yours, Evelyn, then who the hell did you bring home from the hospital?" "I brought home the baby they gave me," she screamed back. But I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was looking at the second page of the report. Alistair had insisted on Sterling taking the test too, just to anchor the lineage. "Dad," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a mile away. "Look at Sterling's results." Alistair grabbed the second page. I watched his eyes move. Subject B, Sterling Thorne. Biological relationship to Alistair Thorne, 0%. Biological relationship to Evelyn Thorne, 99.9%. The room went absolutely still. Sterling was my mother's son, but he wasn't Alistair's. And I wasn't related to either of them. 30 years of accusations. 30 years of Alistair calling my mother a liar because of my red hair and my height, while his perfect son, the one he worshipped, the one who looked exactly like him, was the actual result of an affair. Or so he thought. "You..." Alistair turned on my mother, his face contorted with a rage so pure it was terrifying. "You cheated! You used a donor? You had a lover? You've been raising another man's bastard under my roof for 31 years while you let me think it was Cassidy who was the interloper?" "I didn't!" my mother cried, collapsing onto the floor. "Alistair, I swear on my life, I don't know how this is possible." "I'm leaving," Alistair spat, grabbing his coat. "Don't be here when I get back, either of you. The gala is in 2 weeks, and I will be announcing the dissolution of this family to every person in this city." He slammed the door so hard the crystal on the table rattled. I stood there, looking at Sterling. He was staring at his hands, his thorn features looking like a mask that had suddenly slipped. He wasn't a thorn, he was just some guy. And I was a ghost. But I'm a social worker. I don't just sit and cry when a system breaks. I fix it. I grabbed my bag. Sterling, get up, I said. We're going to St. Jude's. It's closed, Cassidy, he said, his voice hollow. It's been a condo complex for 10 years. I don't care, I said. The records didn't just vanish. Someone knows where we came from, and I'm going to find out whose life I've been living for 29 years, and whose life you've been stealing. I spent the next 48 hours in a fever dream of microfiche and public archives. I found a retired nurse named Martha, who lived in a tiny cottage in the Poconos. She was 84, her memory fading, but when I showed her a picture of the storm from March 1996, her eyes cleared. "The blizzard of the century," she whispered. "We lost power for 14 hours. The nursery was a nightmare. The infants were being kept in the hallways because the radiators in the main ward froze. We didn't have the electronic tags then, just those plastic bracelets. And babies, they lose weight in the first few days, dear. The bracelets, they slip off." "Martha," I said, leaning in, "did you lose 2 babies? A girl and a boy?" She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "We lost dozens, but I remember the Thorne baby. The doctor, he was so demanding. He kept calling every hour, even in the snow. He wanted his legacy protected. We were so scared of him that when we found a dark-haired boy whose bracelet was missing and a dark-haired Thorne father waiting, we made it fit." "And the girl?" I asked, my heart in my throat. "There was a family," she said. "The O'Sheas, Irish immigrants, 5 daughters already, all with hair like copper. When a red-haired girl appeared in the basin near their mother, nobody questioned it. It just made sense." I had my answer. I wasn't a Thorne. I was an O'Shea. And Sterling was a Thorne, but not Alistair's. My mother had been telling the truth, but there had been 2 switches. One in the nursery, and one that happened before the hospital even knew. I went to find Maya O'Shea. She lived in a row house in South Philly. She was a public defender. She was tall, she had obsidian eyes, and she had a brooding brow that could stop a heart. She was the real Thorne daughter. And when I told her who she was, she didn't want the money. She didn't want the estate. "I have a father who loves me," she said, looking at a photo of a man in a firefighter's uniform. "He worked double shifts at the docks to send me to law school. You think I want to be the daughter of a man who treats his family like a surgical complication?" "He's going to humiliate my mother at the gala, Maya," I said. "He's going to tell everyone she cheated. He's going to destroy her life to protect his ego." Maya looked at the photo of my mother, the woman who had birthed her but never held her. "Give me the address," Maya said. "I think it's time Dr. Thorne had a consultation with the truth." The gala was held in the Great Stair Hall of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It was a sea of black ties and silk gowns. Alistair was at the top of the stairs, looking like a king. He had a giant projector screen behind him. He had spent the last 2 weeks refining his speech. He was going to expose the fraud. He didn't know I was in the AV booth. He didn't know that Maya was standing in the shadows of the Greek columns, and he certainly didn't know that I had found the third person, the man my mother had cheated with, except she hadn't. 31 years ago, before Alistair Thorne was a god, he was a resident. And he had made a mistake. A medical mistake that he had covered up. He had used an experimental procedure on a patient, and when it failed, he had blamed a nurse. That nurse was my mother's best friend, and when my mother found out, she didn't leave him. She was too scared. But she did something else. I looked at the final piece of the puzzle in my hand. A medical record from a private fertility clinic in 1994. Alistair Thorne was sterile. He had been sterile since a childhood bout of mumps. He had known Sterling wasn't his from the very beginning. He had agreed to the donor. He had signed the papers, but he had used that secret to keep my mother under his thumb for 3 decades. He had let her believe he was graciously accepting another man's child, while he used me, the baby he truly believed was an affair baby, as the whip to keep her in line. He didn't know I was the O'Shea baby. He thought I was the proof of her betrayal. And tonight, the whip was going to crack in the other direction. We are just getting started, and I can see the shock on your faces already. This isn't just a story about a hospital mistake. It's a story about a man who built a kingdom on a foundation of lies and used his own family as the bricks. If you're enjoying this journey into the truth, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything? I'd love to hear your theories on what happens next. And remember, if you want to see more stories of justice being served, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get back to the museum, where the legacy is about to go up in flames. Alistair stepped to the podium. The light from the chandelier glittered off his silver hair. He looked out at the 500 most powerful people in Philadelphia and cleared his throat. "Excellence," he began. "It is not a choice. It is a biological mandate. Tonight, as I step down from the surgical theater, I wanted to share with you the Thorne map, a genetic proof of the legacy I leave behind." He signaled to the AV booth. I took a deep breath. My finger was hovering over the enter key. "But before we show the data," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "I have a confession. For 30 years, I have carried a burden. I have raised a daughter who, despite my best efforts, showed no trace of our family's brilliance. And now the science tells us why." He looked at my mother, who was sitting in the front row, her face as white as her silk gown. "The science tells us that my wife, the woman I have honored and protected, has been living a lie. Cassidy Thorne is not my daughter. She is the product of an infidelity that has stained this family for 3 decades. The room gasped. I could hear the whispers starting. The social death of Evelyn Thorne was happening in real time. "But," Alistair continued, a triumphant smile spreading across his face, "my son, Sterling, he is the true Thorne. He is the carrier of the torch." I hit the key. The screen didn't show the Thorne map. It showed a video. A grainy, black and white video from a security camera in a fertility clinic dated 1994. In the video, a young Alistair Thorne was sitting in an office signing a document. The audio was clear. "I understand, Dr. Miller," the young Alistair said. "Since I cannot father children, we will use the donor we discussed, but the records must be sealed. My reputation cannot handle the stigma of infertility. My son must be seen as a thorn." The room went from whispering to dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Alistair froze. He turned around to look at the screen, his face turning a shade of purple that looked like a medical emergency. "What is this?" he hissed. "Turn it off!" I didn't turn it off. I switched to the next slide. The DNA results for Sterling Thorne. Biological relationship to Alistair Thorne, 0%. Followed by the legal document Alistair had signed, agreeing to the donor. "You knew," I said into the microphone from the AV booth, my voice echoing through the massive hall. "You've known for 31 years that Sterling wasn't yours. You chose him, you bought him, and you used that secret to torture my mother, making her feel like she owed you her life because you accepted his existence." I walked out of the booth and onto the balcony overlooking the stairs. Every eye in the room turned toward me. "But here's the best part, Alistair," I said, leaning over the railing. "You were so busy hiding your own secret, and so busy accusing my mother of cheating to cover your own tracks, that you didn't realize the hospital made a mistake the night I was born." I signaled to Maya. She stepped out from behind the column. "Meet Maya O'Shea," I said. "The woman who was born 11 minutes before me, the woman who carries your DNA, the masterpiece you've been looking for." Maya walked up the stairs. her obsidian eyes locked on Alistair. "I'm the daughter you wanted," Maya said, her voice like a gavel. "I have your brain, I have your drive, and I have your Thorne temper. But I don't want your name, and I don't want your legacy." She pulled a stack of papers from her bag and threw them at his feet. "Those are the hospital logs from 1996, Maya said. "The proof that the cuckoo's egg you've been punishing for 29 years is actually a girl named Cassidy O'Shea. She was the baby who was supposed to go home to a family that loved her. Instead, she got you." Alistair was shaking. He looked at Maya, then at me, then at the screen that was still showing his signed confession of infertility. "Evelyn," he stammered, looking at my mother. My mother stood up. She didn't look like a prisoner anymore. She looked like a woman who had just seen the prison walls crumble. She walked up the stairs, past the elite of Philadelphia, and stopped in front of her husband. "You knew," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You let me believe I was broken. You let me believe I was lesser because I couldn't give you a biological son. You let me spend 30 years apologizing for a sin I never committed, while you were the one holding the pen." She took her wedding ring off. It was a 5-carat diamond that had always felt like a shackle. She dropped it into his champagne glass. "The Thorne legacy is over, Alistair," my mother said, "because nobody here respects a god who is afraid of a lab report." She turned to me and Maya. "Let's go, girls. We have a real family waiting for us in South Philly." We walked out of the museum. Behind us, the legacy gala had turned into a legacy inquest. The donors were leaving. The board members were calling their lawyers, and Alistair Thorne was standing alone at the top of the stairs, surrounded by the ruins of a 30-year lie. It's been 6 months since that night. Alistair Thorne is no longer a doctor. The medical board stripped him of his license after the fertility clinic video led to an investigation into his ethical history. It turns out when you're a god, you tend to leave a lot of bodies in your wake. My mother is living in a beautiful townhouse in Rittenhouse Square. She's happy. She spends her weekends with the O'Sheas. It was strange at first, meeting the family that should have been mine, but the O'Sheas are, well, they're loud, they're messy, and they love with a ferocity that Alistair Thorne couldn't even imagine. I'm Cassidy O'Shea now. I kept my red hair. I kept my height. And I kept my mother. Both of them. Margaret O'Shea and Evelyn Thorne have become the dynamic duo of the Philadelphia charity circuit. And Maya is the sister I never knew I needed. We're both thorns in temperament, which means we're both stubborn as hell, but we're using that stubbornness for good. DNA doesn't make a family. Secrets don't make a legacy. Family is the choice you make to stand by someone when the math doesn't add up. And as for Alistair, he's still in that big, empty house in Mainline. He spends his days looking at the Thorne map, a map of a kingdom that never existed. He was right about one thing, though. The truth always surfaces. It just took a blizzard, a red-haired social worker, and 29 years to find its way home. We are just getting started, and I can see that this ending has left you with as much to think about as it did for me. This wasn't just about a hospital mistake or a bitter surgeon. It was about the strength of women who refused to be defined by a man's lies. If you've stuck with us through this whole journey, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story of truth and redemption. I'd love to know, what would you do if you found out your entire life was a clerical error? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep seeking the truth. The morning after the gala. The city of Philadelphia felt different. To most people, it was just another Tuesday in the city of brotherly love. But for me, Cassidy O'Shea, the air felt lighter, yet thick with the static of a brewing storm. The headlines were already screaming. The Thorne dynasty toppled by DNA. Renowned surgeon's secret fertility struggle exposed. My phone had been vibrating since 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and even a few people from high school who hadn't spoken to me in a decade, wanting to know if it was all true. But I wasn't looking at the news. I was sitting at a chipped formica table in a small kitchen in South Philly. The air smelled of bacon grease, strong Irish breakfast tea, and the kind of lived-in warmth that a mansion in Mainline could never replicate. Across from me sat Margaret O'Shea, my biological mother. She was a woman with hands that showed a lifetime of work, knuckles slightly swollen, skin etched with the history of raising 6 children on a dock worker's salary. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, and for the first time in 29 years, it felt right. "I kept looking at Maya," Margaret whispered, her voice thick with that beautiful, gritty South Philly accent. "For 29 years, I looked at that girl, and I thought, where did those dark eyes come from? My husband, Seamus, God rest his soul, he used to say she was a changeling from the old country. We laughed about it. We loved her so much, Cassidy. We didn't care that she didn't look like us. And I spent 29 years wondering why I felt like an alien," I said, a single tear catching in my eyelashes. "Alistair made sure I knew I didn't belong. He used my red hair like a stain on his reputation." "Well," Margaret said, her jaw tightening, "he's going to learn that an O'Shea doesn't just go away. You're our blood, Cassidy. And Maya, she's a Thorne by blood, but she's an O'Shea by heart. And between the two of you, that man doesn't stand a chance." Maya walked into the kitchen then, looking sharp in a navy blue suit, her briefcase bursting with files. She looked at Margaret, then at me. There was a weird mirrored symmetry in the room. I had the O'Shea face, she had the Thorne face. But when Maya spoke, she sounded exactly like Margaret. "The papers are filed," Maya said, sliding a manila folder onto the table next to the teapot. "We aren't just suing Alistair for emotional distress. We are going after the Consolidated Health Group. They're the ones who bought out St. Jude's Memorial back in 2004. They took on the liabilities, and they took on the secrets." "What did you find, Maya?" I asked. She sat down, her expression turning into that cold, clinical mask I recognized from Alistair. But behind it, I could see the fire of an O'Shea. "The administrator back in 1996 was a man named Arthur Sterling. Does that name sound familiar?" I froze. "Sterling, my brother's name." "Exactly," Maya said, her eyes flashing. "Alistair Thorne didn't just name his chosen son after a mentor. He named him after the man who helped him cover up the switch. Arthur Sterling wasn't just a hospital administrator. He was Alistair's college roommate. They were brothers in the darkest sense of the word." We are just getting started, and I can see the puzzle pieces falling into place in a way that is both terrifying and exhilarating. This is no longer just a story about a family mistake. It's a story of a deep-seated conspiracy between two powerful men who thought they could play God with the lives of innocent families. If you're as invested in seeing Arthur Sterling and Alistair Thorne face justice as I am, please take a moment to like this video and drop a justice in the comments. I want to know who you're rooting for in this legal battle. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to follow every twist of this 29-year-old mystery. Now, let's dive into the evidence that Arthur Sterling thought he'd burned decades ago. Maya pulled out a series of internal memos. They were photocopies, grainy, slightly tilted, as if they'd been grabbed in a hurry. "I found a whistleblower," Maya explained. "A former clerk named Linda who worked in the billing department. She kept these because she realized that the hospital was billing for procedures that never happened during the blizzard. Specifically, they were billing Alistair's insurance for private nursery security on the nights of the switch." "Security?" I asked. "In a blizzard?" "It wasn't for security, Cassidy," Maya said, leaning in. "It was a bribe. Arthur Sterling billed the insurance company, Alistair paid the deductible out of pocket, and that money went directly into a private account for the trainee nurse, Sarah Jenkins, the girl you talked to." "So it wasn't just a mistake," I whispered. "The switch happened because of the chaos. but they chose to keep it that way because Alistair wanted a perfect son and didn't want the red-haired girl he suspected wasn't his. Exactly, Maya said. He knew there was a chance the babies weren't right, but instead of testing then, instead of fixing it, he and Sterling decided to curate their families. Alistair got the dark-haired boy he wanted. The O'Sheas got the girl that looked like them. It was efficient, it was clean, and it was a felony. The next few weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers. Maya was a force of nature. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by caffeine and a righteous fury that made even the senior partners at her firm step aside. We tracked down Arthur Sterling. He was 75 now, living in a gated community in Florida, playing golf and pretending he hadn't spent his career burying the sins of the medical elite. We flew down to Orlando for the deposition. The room was cold, the air conditioner humming with a clinical drone. Arthur Sterling sat across from us, wearing an expensive linen shirt and a look of bored indifference. His lawyer was a shark from a top-tier firm in Miami, a man who looked like he'd traded his soul for a better tan. "Mr. Sterling," Maya began, her voice steady and echoing through the small conference room. "Let's talk about the night of March 12th, 1996, the blizzard of the century." Sterling let out a dry, rattling laugh. "It was 30 years ago, Ms. O'Shea. I barely remember what I had for breakfast." "I think you'll remember this," Maya said, sliding the private security bill across the table. "Why did Dr. Alistair Thorne pay $10,000 for nursery security when the hospital was on emergency generators and the National Guard was the only thing moving on the streets?" Sterling's lawyer stepped in. "Objection. Relevance." "The relevance," Maya snapped, "is that this security fee matches the exact amount paid to Sarah Jenkins, a trainee nurse who suddenly moved to New Jersey and changed her career 3 weeks later. Care to explain the coincidence, Arthur?" Sterling shifted in his seat. The boredom was starting to crack. He looked at me, standing by the door, and for a second, I saw the ghost of 1996 in his eyes. He saw the red hair. He saw the mistake he'd tried to bury. "Alistair was a friend," Sterling muttered. "He was a brilliant surgeon. He had a lot on his plate. He didn't need the distraction of a messy nursery error." "So you decided to reassign human beings like they were pieces of equipment?" Maya's voice was rising now. "You saw 2 families, one rich and useful to you, one poor and disposable. And you decided the pretty baby belonged with the doctor and the common baby belonged with the dock worker?" "It was for the best," Sterling suddenly shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "The Vances, the Thornes, they provide for this city. The O'Sheas had 5 kids already. What was one more? They didn't even notice." The room went silent. Maya didn't back down. She leaned in until she was inches from his face. "They noticed," she whispered. "My father, the man who raised me, he noticed every single day that I didn't look like him, but he loved me enough to keep his mouth shut. Alistair Thorne, on the other hand, he used that difference to destroy the woman he married. You didn't just reassign babies, Arthur. You weaponized them." We walked out of that deposition with enough evidence to sink a battleship, but the final boss was still waiting in Philadelphia. We are just getting started, and I can feel the fire in Maya's voice as she stands up to the man who tried to play with her destiny. This story is more than just a family drama. It's a battle against a system that thought some lives were more valuable than others. If you're feeling that same sense of justice, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Arthur Sterling deserves a prison sentence, or is losing his reputation enough? Let me know in the comments. Now let's head back to Philly, where Alistair Thorne is about to find out that his brotherhood with Sterling has completely collapsed. When we got back to Philadelphia, the atmosphere had turned toxic for Alistair. The Consolidated Health Group, fearing a massive class action lawsuit from other families who had been at St. Jude's during the blizzard, had officially distanced themselves from both Sterling and Thorne. They released a statement appalled by the findings. Alistair was holed up in the main line estate. He hadn't been seen in weeks. The gates were locked, the lights were dim, and the Thorne name was being scrubbed from every building in the city. But Sterling, my former brother, he was the one who surprised me. He came to my apartment in West Philly. He looked terrible. The perfect Thorne suit was gone, replaced by a hoodie and jeans. He looked like he hadn't slept since the gala. "Cassidy," he said, standing in the hallway. I went to see my real mother, Lydia Vance." I stepped back, letting him in. "And?" "She's a waitress in Delaware," Sterling said, his voice cracking. "She's been living in a trailer for 20 years. She told me she always knew the hospital lied. She said she saw the birthmark on her baby in the delivery room, but when they brought the baby back 2 hours later, the mark was gone. She tried to fight it. She tried to sue, but Alistair, our father, he used his influence to have her psychologically evaluated. He told the courts she was suffering from postpartum psychosis and had her unfit to keep the records." I felt a chill run down my spine. Alistair hadn't just accepted the switch. He had actively destroyed a woman who tried to tell the truth. "I'm testifying, Cassidy," Sterling said, tears finally spilling over. "Against Alistair, against Sterling, against all of them. I'm not a Thorne. I'm a Vance, and I'm going to make sure that man never sees the light of day again." The trial was set for October. The courtroom was packed. It was the trial of the decade. On one side, you had the legacy of Alistair Thorne, represented by a team of lawyers who looked like they were attending a funeral. On the other side, you had us, Maya O'Shea leading the charge, me, Sterling Vance, and the two mothers, Evelyn Thorne and Margaret O'Shea, sitting side by side. Alistair Thorne was led in. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo tonight. He was wearing a standard gray suit, and for the first time, he looked small. He looked like a man who had realized that DNA was the one thing he couldn't operate on. Maya stood up for the opening statement. "Members of the jury," she began, her voice filling every corner of the room. "This is a case about arrogance. It is a case about men who believe that their status gave them the right to rewrite the lives of others. They didn't just switch babies. They stole identities. They stole 30 years of belonging. And they did it because they thought they could get away with it." She looked directly at Alistair. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "You spent 30 years calling your daughter a mistake. Today, we're going to show you that the only mistake was you." The first witness was Sarah Jenkins. She took the stand, her voice trembling, but her words unshakable. She told the jury about the bribe. She told them about the security fee. She told them how Arthur Sterling had laughed when he told her that the red-haired girl was going to the Irish trash where she belonged. The jury gasped. One woman in the front row was crying. Then Sterling Vance took the stand. He told them about the port wine stain. He told them how Alistair had made him rehearse Thorne history every night until he knew it by heart, as if a story could replace blood. He told them about the night he visited Lydia Vance, and how he realized he had been bought to satisfy a surgeon's ego. But the knockout blow came when Maya called the surprise witness, a man named Dr. Miller, the one from the 1994 fertility clinic video. He was old, walking with a cane, but his mind was sharp. "Dr. Miller?" Maya said. "Did Alistair Thorne know that neither of the children he was raising were his?" "He knew," Miller said, his voice echoing with the authority of the grave. "He came to me in 1997, a year after the second birth. He had done his own private testing. He realized the switch had happened. But he told me, and I quote, 'The dark-haired boy is the perfect Thorne. I will not trade him back for a girl who looks like a dock worker's mistake.' and I will not admit I am sterile to the world. We will bury this." The courtroom erupted. The judge had to bang his gavel for 3 minutes to restore order. Alistair Thorne slumped in his chair. The god of Philadelphia had just been humanized in the worst possible way. He wasn't just a victim of a switch. He was the architect of his own family's misery. He had known. He had known I was an O'Shea since I was a year old. And he had still spent 28 years calling my mother a cheater and making me feel like I didn't deserve to breathe his air. We are just getting started, and I can feel the absolute betrayal in this courtroom. Alistair Thorne didn't just hide the truth, he used it as a weapon to maintain his perfect image while destroying everyone around him. If you are as shocked as I am by Dr. Miller's testimony, please, take a moment to share this video. This is a story about the lengths people will go to for their pride. Hit that subscribe button to see the final verdict. I want to know. If you were the judge, what would Alistair's sentence be? Let me know in the comments. We are moving into the final arguments now. The jury didn't even take 3 hours. They came back with a verdict that shook the city, guilty, on all counts. Fraud, conspiracy, emotional distress, and interference with parental rights. Arthur Sterling was sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. At 75, it was essentially a life sentence. Alistair Thorne, because of his medical history and his contribution to the city, was given 15 years. But more importantly, the judge ordered that every cent of his Thorne trust, every penny of that legacy, be liquidated. The money didn't go back to Alistair. It went to the victims. It went to Lydia Vance, who finally moved out of her trailer and into a home that Sterling Vance bought for her. It went to the O'Sheas, who used it to set up a legal aid foundation for families who have been erased by the medical system. And it went to me. But I didn't keep it. I'm sitting in my mother's garden now. Evelyn Thorne, who is officially Evelyn Hartigan. She's sitting in a sun-drenched chair, reading a book. Beside her, Margaret O'Shea is helping her prune the roses. They call themselves the Two Mothers. I walked over to them, holding a cup of tea. "It's over," I said, showing them the final court documents. Evelyn looked up, her eyes bright and clear. "It was never about the money, Cassidy. It was about the silence. For 30 years, I lived in a room with no windows. You and Maya, you didn't just find the truth, you broke the glass." Maya walked out of the house then, wearing jeans and an O'Shea sweatshirt. She looked at me and smiled, a real, genuine Thorne smile. "We're going to South Philly for dinner," Maya said. "Margaret's making her famous stew, and Sterling's bringing Lydia." "I'll be there," I said. I looked at the copper-red hair on my arms, glittering in the afternoon sun. I looked at the stormy Atlantic eyes reflected in my tea. I'm not a Thorne, I'm not a placeholder. I am Cassidy O'Shea. And for the first time in 29 years, I am exactly who I am supposed to be. The Thorne map is gone. The legacy is a memory. But the truth is sitting in a garden in Philadelphia, drinking tea and laughing at the wind. And as for Alistair, he's in a cell in a prison 3 hours away. He has a lot of time to think about mathematical certainty. He was right about one thing, though. The math didn't add up, because you can't calculate the weight of a mother's love or the cost of a daughter's justice. We are just getting started, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this entire saga. This has been a journey of pain, discovery, and ultimately, a beautiful redemption. If you found this story powerful, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know that the truth will always find its way home. I've loved reading your comments and theories. Let's keep the conversation going. What was your favorite part of Cassidy's journey? Let me know below. Until next time, I'm your host, and this was The Thorne Reckoning. The sentencing of Alistair Thorne was supposed to be the end. That's what the newspaper said. Justice served. The Thorne nightmare concludes. But for those of us living in the wreckage, justice isn't a gavel hitting a block. It's a slow, painful process of unlearning 30 years of lies. It started with the Inquiry of the 34. That was the name the media gave to the other families who were at St. Jude's Memorial during that 3-day blackout in March 1996. When Maya and I went public, we didn't just expose our own swap. We pulled the pin on a grenade that had been sitting in the hospital's basement for 3 decades. I spent the 6 months after the trial working alongside Maya. She was the legal mind, but I was the boots on the ground. As a social worker, I knew how to talk to people who had just been told their entire life was a fiction. We set up a temporary office in a small storefront in South Philly. Every day, the bell above the door would chime, and another person would walk in, holding a faded birth certificate, looking for the truth. I remember a woman named Grace. She was 55, a school teacher from North Philly. She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she showed me a photo of her son, David. "He's 30 years old, Cassidy," Grace whispered. "And he's the light of my life. But I've always felt like he was a guest. He has these blue eyes. Nobody in my family has blue eyes. When I saw the news about Dr. Thorne, I couldn't sleep. I just kept looking at him while he was sleeping on the couch, wondering, is he mine?" That was the real tragedy. It wasn't just Alistair's ego. It was the seeds of doubt that Arthur Sterling and the hospital administrators had planted in the minds of an entire generation of parents. We helped Grace get a DNA test. It turned out, David was her son. The blue eyes were a recessive gene from a great-grandfather she'd forgotten about. But the relief on her face when the results came back, it was heartbreaking. She shouldn't have had to wonder. She shouldn't have had to pay for the peace of mind that was stolen by a hospital's greed. But not everyone was as lucky as Grace. By the end of the 2nd month, we had identified 4 more confirmed swaps. 4 sets of parents who had been raising the wrong children for 30 years. It was an epidemic of errors. And every single one of them led back to a single person, Arthur Sterling. We are just getting started, and I can feel the weight of these families' stories pressing down on all of us. This isn't just about Cassidy and Maya anymore. It's about a community that was lied to by an institution they trusted with their most precious moments. If you find this exploration of systemic corruption as gripping as I do, please take a second to like this video and share it. I want to know your thoughts. If you found out you were one of the 34, would you want to meet your biological family immediately, or would you be too afraid of what you might find? Drop your comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us as we uncover the final, darkest secrets of St. Jude's. While I was handling the intake for the victims, Maya was digging into the financials. She discovered that the Consolidated Health Group hadn't just bought St. Jude's. They had inherited a secret insurance fund. "It's called a Legacy Indemnity Reserve," Maya explained one night, her desk covered in spreadsheets and cold coffee cups. It was a pot of money set aside specifically to settle unspecified nursery discrepancies quietly. "They've been paying out quiet settlements for years, Cassidy. We've found at least 6 other families who took the money and signed NDAs back in the early 2000s. "So they knew," I said, the familiar anger rising in my chest. "They knew the blizzard was a catastrophe, and they chose to buy their way out of the truth instead of fixing it." "Exactly," Maya said. "And the man who signed the checks? Arthur Sterling. But he wasn't acting alone. He had a board of directors, and guess who was the head of the medical ethics committee for that board?" I didn't even have to guess. Alistair Thorne. It was a perfect circle of corruption. Alistair used his position on the ethics committee to ensure that any discrepancies were handled internally. In exchange, Sterling ensured that Alistair's personal secrets, his infertility and the nursery switch, were kept under lock and key. But then, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a lawyer representing Sterling Vance. My former brother. He wanted to meet. Not at a law office, but at a park in Fairmount. Sterling looked like a ghost of the man I'd grown up with. The Thorne arrogance had been completely stripped away, leaving a man who looked, well, lost. He was sitting on a bench, feeding the pigeons, his expensive leather shoes covered in dust. "I found my father, Cassidy," Sterling said, not looking at me. "Your biological father?" I asked, sitting down beside him. He nodded. "His name is Marcus Vance. He was a mechanic. He died in 2012. He never knew I existed. Lydia, my mother, she told me he used to sit on the porch every night after work, looking at the stars, wondering if his son was somewhere out there looking back at him." Sterling's voice broke. "I spent 30 years being groomed to be a god of neurosurgery. I spent 30 years looking down on people like Marcus Vance, and all this time, I was his. I was the son of a man who worked with his hands, and I never got to meet him because Alistair Thorne wanted a trophy instead of a child." "Sterling," I said softly, "you can't change the past, but you can change who you are now." "I sold the Porsche," Sterling said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "And the condo. I'm moving to Delaware. I'm going to help Lydia fix up the trailer, and then I think I'm going to go to trade school. I'm done with the Thorne legacy. I want to build something real." I watched him walk away, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of him. He wasn't a Thorne. He wasn't a Vance. He was just a man trying to find his way home. But the final piece of the puzzle came from my mother, Evelyn. She had been remarkably quiet during the investigation. She was happy with the O'Sheas. She was flourishing in her new life. But there was a shadow in her eyes that wouldn't go away. One evening, while we were sitting on her porch, she handed me a small, wooden box. "I found this in the safe deposit box Alistair forgot about," she said. Inside the box was a single, silver baby spoon and a letter. It was dated April 4th, 1996. 3 weeks after the blizzard. The letter was from Alistair, but it wasn't addressed to my mother. It was addressed to the hospital administrator, Arthur Sterling. "Arthur," it read, "the girl is a problem. She has the red hair of the O'Shea lineage. It is a biological impossibility for her to be mine or Evelyn's. However, the boy is a perfect match for the image we discussed. I will keep the boy. But the girl? Ensure she is never tested. Ensure she is never told. If she ever finds out, I will destroy you, Arthur. I have the files on your billing errors from '94. We are in this together." I dropped the letter. My hands were shaking. Alistair didn't suspect I wasn't his. He knew from the very beginning. He had looked at me as a 3-week-old baby and decided I was a problem because of my hair color. He had consciously chosen to raise a child he knew wasn't his, while he punished me for existing. "He could have fixed it," I whispered. "He could have given me to the O'Sheas when I was a month old. He could have given Maya back to you." "He didn't want truth," so my mother said, her voice hard. "He wanted power, and he used us all to get it." We are just getting started, and I can feel the absolute chill of that letter in the air. To think that Alistair Thorne knew everything when Cassidy was just an infant, and yet he still chose to spend 3 decades torturing her. It's beyond cruelty. If this revelation makes your blood boil as much as mine, please like this video and share it with someone who believes in the power of truth. I want to know, what is the most unforgivable part of this story to you? The hospital switch, or Alistair's 30-year lie? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We are entering the final chapter of the Thorne saga now. The discovery of that letter changed the legal landscape. It was no longer negligence, it was kidnapping by deception. Maya used the letter to initiate a new round of charges. This time it wasn't just about money or reputations, it was about human rights. The trial of the people versus Alistair Thorne and Arthur Sterling for the conspiracy of the 34 began a year after the gala. It was no longer a local scandal, it was a national sensation. I stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by the other families. We weren't just victims anymore, we were a movement. The hospital board was forced to issue a public apology, not in a small newspaper, but on a televised broadcast. They had to pay out a settlement so large it nearly bankrupted the entire health group. But more importantly, they had to open the nursery archives for every child born between 1990 and 2000. Thousands of people in Philadelphia finally got the chance to know for certain who they were. As for Alistair, I visited him in prison one last time. He was sitting behind the glass, wearing a beige jumpsuit. He looked fragile. The god of the operating room was gone. "Why, Alistair?" I asked. "You knew I wasn't yours. You knew Maya was out there. Why didn't you just tell the truth?" He looked at me, and for a second, just a second, I saw a flash of the old Alistair. "The truth is untidy, Cassidy," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "A thorn is not untidy. I made a choice to have a son who looked like a thorn. I made a choice to have a wife who was beholden to me. You were just the price of that stability." "I was a human being," I said. "You were a complication," he replied. I stood up. "Goodbye, Alistair. I hope you enjoy the mathematical certainty of your cell. It's the only thing you have left." I walked out of the prison and into the cool autumn air. Maya was waiting for me in the car. We drove back to South Philly, back to the row house where the O'Sheas were waiting with a welcome home dinner. I am Cassidy O'Shea. I am a social worker. I am a sister. I am a daughter. And I am finally, free of the Thorne legacy. The city of Philadelphia still remembers the blizzard of '96. They remember the snow, they remember the ice, and they remember the Great Switch. But when they tell the story now, they don't talk about the brilliant Dr. Thorne. They talk about the red-haired girl who found her way home, and they talk about the two mothers who showed the world that blood might be thick. But love is unbreakable. We are just getting started, and I want to thank you for coming on this massive journey with me. This story has been a testament to the fact that no matter how deep you bury the truth, it has a way of growing until it breaks the concrete. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Thorne saga, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support means everything as we continue to tell stories that matter. What's the biggest lesson you took away from Cassidy's story? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep seeking your own truth, no matter how long it takes to find it.